Hello everyone, and welcome again to today's webinar, Transforming Business Continuity and Disaster Recovery for SLED Organizations. My name is Adam Margette. I'm a technical specialist. I've been here with Unitrends for just under 4 years, and I will be your host for today's presentation. Now, before we begin, just a couple of quick housekeeping items. Firstly, this session is being recorded, and a link for playback will be made available to all attendees following the conclusion of today's presentation. Also, when you joined the call, all attendees were placed into listen-only mode, so please do use the chat or the Q&A functionality within your WebEx console. You should see it down towards the bottom right-hand side of the WebEx interface. Feel free to submit any questions or comments as they occur to you throughout the presentation. We do have some time reserved at the end here for Q&A. I would also encourage everyone out there, if you're not already, to give us a follow or a like on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Social media is a great place to keep up to date with all of the latest and greatest news, announcements, promotions, giveaways, and more coming from Unitrends to our community. So without any further ado, let's kind of jump right in here. And I think that when it comes to SLED in particular, education, state and local government organizations, it's really a unique industry with some unique challenges around data protection. And a lot of what we're hearing from users that are coming and meeting with Unitrends to evaluate the technology or folks that we've already been working with is that in a lot of cases, and more so than in other industries, it really has become a less is more world for a lot of SLED organizations out there. And many cases they're facing constricting budgets, but on the other hand, you've got a growing amount of users and data to protect. You're being asked to provide secure, near continuous availability of your applications while still being held to extremely high standards for security, archival, data retention, and compliance. On top of the complexity that comes with managing your existing technology, more and more organizations are expanding beyond physical infrastructure just located in the data center to modernize technology and the overall end-user experience. We've seen this in growing expanses of virtualized infrastructure and especially recently a shift to more cloud-based services, most commonly your software as a service, your Google Suite, your Office 365, but also infrastructure as a service where you're now leveraging AWS, Azure, the Google Clouds to drive production workloads or instances. What we're hearing folks are asking for is that they're looking for a single business continuity and backup solution to span these disparate platforms, these increasingly complex infrastructure needs, but they're looking to keep storage costs and management overhead under control. So hopefully here be able to kind of demonstrate to you how we're enabling those organizations to reduce and eliminate some of that sprawl, have full protection for their different platforms, regardless if that data resides on-premise, in a private cloud environment, public cloud, and so forth. So, from a lot of the organizations that we're working with, we hear a lot of common challenges, and we kind of alluded to this in the opening here, but insufficient IT resources. We're being given less staff, less budget, while being asked to deliver more and more availability. In a lot of cases, those restricted budgets have impeded organizations from advancing or keeping up with the latest software releases and versions here. We work with a lot of organizations that are still running Windows 2008, or they had just recently migrated off of Windows 2003. They don't always have the budget to keep up with Microsoft's 2019 release, for example. We certainly recognize that ransomware is a significant threat, especially in SLED. Well, healthcare is the #1 attacked vertical. Security provider Emisoft reported almost 700 cases of government, state and local, and educational entities that were impacted by ransomware last year. And keep in mind, from a public sector perspective, these are just the attacks that we know about. So much of this is going unreported in privatized industry. We think that the damages when it comes to ransomware could be significantly larger than what's being reported, but in a lot of cases they are targeting these organizations with a tremendous amount of PII that's available for resale on the dark market, and there were a number of widely publicized attacks last year. We earlier this year looked at the more specific cases in Baltimore and Riviera Beach to kind of understand the vulnerabilities and what made those organizations such an appealing target for the threat actors. But in keeping up with availability demands, the need for rapid recovery is certainly present throughout a lot of SLED organizations, and it's at odds, or it ends with reliance historically on tape-based solutions or tape-based backups. There's not a lot of consistency or visibility into a testing process. We don't have a way to guarantee or verify recovery. In a lot of cases, these tapes are being brought off-site to a secure location in a fireproof vault, and there's time to recover those tapes, time to rehydrate that media. So in a lot of cases, these tape backups are sufficient for a long-term retention standpoint, that immutable copy of data, but they're not able to meet the demands of the SLAs that we as IT professionals are being asked to provide from the business units that we're serving. And I think that we see this with what those availability goals really look like in the risk that's represented when we're unable to meet those. The calculations here were being driven by findings from Gartner, and the industry's really coalesced around their figure. About $9,000 per minute is the average impact of a data center outage, so that certainly represents significant financial risk. Taking into account here, we're not just looking at an organization's inability to transact, but also what are the impacts on employee productivity, potential costs of recovery depending on the severity of the outage, and that sort of intangible cost, the impact on the brand or the reputation of the organization, that if you're across the headlines or on news reports for the wrong reasons or more there is that risk that, was there a perceived vulnerability or oversight, and do we risk losing potentially our prospective customers or our current customers, maybe our students, our faculty, in education, for example, to our competitors. So when you're looking at justifying the cost for a new solution, this is just one calculation that you can bring to the forefront, and you can personalize this a little bit more, especially in the state and local piece where we may be dealing with emergency response centers, 911 call centers. There are human lives at risk. It goes well beyond that $9,000 per minute. But in justifying a solution, what can you achieve in terms of availability with implementing new technology, and how does this reduce your risk by being able to provide more rapid recovery or more availability for your users? Just a couple of figures here again that you can reference and kind of put into context with your organization by working through with some of those business units, really understanding what does downtime represent for those different users. Now, before we get into the solutions, I did want to take a moment to introduce the company for anyone that might be joining us for the first time. And Unitrends has been in this space for over 30 years. We actually celebrated our 30th anniversary as a company last September, originally founded in 1989. And our origin was protecting healthcare organizations. The uni in Unitrends was that our founder, Dr. Steve Schwartz, was working with a lot of customers in the healthcare field to help them protect their Unix systems. There wasn't an adequate data protection solution in the marketplace at that time as he saw it, so he went about architecting and writing his own code. After a number of years and a lot of enhancements and investments into the product, we are where we are today as an organization with over 30,000 customers across the globe trusting Unitrends for their data protection and disaster recovery needs. We're helping those users protect a combined aggregate in excess of 2 exabytes of data. We do offer some cloud services that we're going to talk about a little bit more in depth later on here, but we're managing over 100 petabytes of our customer data in the Unitrends cloud. You can see roughly pinpoints on the map there of where those locations are across the globe, but really backing and supporting everything that we do as our customer support organization. They are based right here in the U.S., and that 98% customer satisfaction rating that we've got on the slide here is an ongoing rolling metric. It's an organization that we place a tremendous amount of investment, visibility, and pride in throughout our organization. But I think, too, lending to our customers' experiences, that team's ability to provide holistic support. You've got a solution here with Unitrends where the hardware elements, the software, and the cloud stack can all be supported, and it's all operated and developed by the same vendor or the same manufacturer. There's no finger pointing with Unitrends because we take ownership of and responsibility of deployment across the entire platform. So for a lot of our users, it's really been a different experience coming from a world where they've pieced together disparate elements of technology in hopes of achieving their vision of business continuity, coming to a vendor that is taking that ownership, and you've got a support group that whether you've got a small little software issue or a more complex question around appliances or cloud, you've got an organization that takes responsibility and has expertise across the entire stack. And kind of focusing here, we've found a home, or a number of organizations have found Unitrends to be a great solution for their needs, but we really, again, are focusing on local government, colleges and universities, and educations for this presentation. But I like to share this slide because when we're working potential trade shows, or we're interacting with folks on these webinars, they're asking, Adam, what's the right fit for Unitrends? Where do you guys really play? And it's not so much a specific segment that, hey, we really excel in healthcare. We really excel where there's data to be protected. A lot of customers are demanding that availability. They're looking to invest in a solution that is cloud-enabled. We've been able to meet the needs and the requirements of a variety of organizations across different industry verticals, subject to different compliance standards, and with varying amounts of data that they need to protect. So, with that in mind, your current backup solution may look something like this here, where you've got kind of in the dark there your on-premise stack. We've started to invest in cloud-based technologies, and on top of all of it, how do we test and have that confidence and that guarantee that we'll be able to recover our data, as organizations have kind of unconsciously stitched together or Frankenstein this solution? You've invited in all of these disparate vendors that need to work together, but you're relying on different products of varying quality, varying support organizations, and in kind of managing this solution day to day, it's all too common for us to hear about customers that have invited in unnecessary complexity and risk. They or their staffs are burdened with the day-to-day tinking and tuning and management of the systems. They've run into potential risks of vendor interoperability. There's that finger pointing that we alluded to earlier. You're having issue getting a virtual machine recovery to kick off. So you call up the software provider, and they're kind of hearing through the issue. They say, no, that sounds like an issue with the storage device. You've got to call the vendors over there. You call up the storage guys, and they're saying the same thing in reverse. No, that's definitely a software problem. At Unitrends, it's our goal to provide answers when and where our customers need them. We'll want to direct you to different elements or different vendors here by offering that all-in-one solution. Again, the ability to automate your recovery testing, protection for your entire environment, and a holistic stack that, again, from the local solution to your offsite recovery needs, long-term data retention management, you've got one phone call to make and one vendor that's responsible for the onus of that solution. Another way to look at this is we pulled from one of our competitors a topology of what deployment would look like just for local backup and restore. So over on the left is the virtual environment, a couple of VMware hosts, the vSphere management, storage for the VM data, and the VMs themselves. Well, we're looking at what we'd assume is a fairly large environment. They need to stand up backup proxies. They've got a third-party storage vendor now. If they want to drive reporting, they need to back-end in a database there, a separate search server for that global search capability. Just layers and layers of complexity and sprawl across the customer's environment. Conversely, to protect this same environment with Unitrends, you're deploying that all-in-one appliance, a single rack mount solution to power all of your local needs with regards to backup and recovery. So what this enables our customers to do is find protection for all of their workloads. Unitrends supports over 250 applications, operating systems, and hypervisors. So you can really design your backup methodology with the goal of recovery in mind. Certainly file level protection is enabled, but for systems with tremendously large file accounts, they need to have instant recovery capabilities. For physical systems, you could use our image or our block agent. If your environment is heavily virtualized, you can leverage a host-level protection or VM snapshots. For more granular protection, log truncation, application quiescence, leverage our application agent. We can even back up those NAS systems or those shared file systems. Again, with goals of recovery in mind, that will help you design your backup strategy, but in a lot of cases where we talk about that need for availability, a few different options to provide that near zero RTO, instant recovery of VMs and Windows systems with that block agent, proactively creating replicas of your most mission critical workloads in advance. They're kept up to date with every backup that you take of the original asset. You store them in an alternate host or in an alternate location where they can go live at a moment's notice to assume the role of a failed client. You can leverage appliance resources for on-appliance recovery. Also built into the backup appliance here is your testing engine. Again, we're taking folks a layer beyond that screenshot verification testing specific application services through the use of canned or custom written scripts. You can orchestrate failover, spin up lab environments for QA and DevOps. All of the reporting is customized and native to the appliance. You don't need to stand up a proxy backend in a database. Those engines live within the recovery series. With regards to local retention, the appliances are sized out for housing a certain amount of backups on-premise on the appliance. You can customize that policy in compliance with long-term retention schemas. Hey, we've got particular records that we need to maintain for 3, 5, 7 years. Set a retention policy specific to the assets that you are backing up. And in terms of getting that data off-site, your replication engines are included, but with that WAN accelerated replication, you also have your engines for data reduction, data deduplication, encryption, the ability to throttle that bandwidth so that we're not overwhelming the pipe, all native to the appliance. So again, when we're talking about that all-in-one solution, I look at that in a couple of different ways, but certainly deploying a Unitrends appliance is one way to really consolidate and reduce the sprawl of that local environment. Now, one thing I do want to note here is that we've talked a lot about the physical appliance. You can use existing hardware as well. You can deploy a Unitrends virtual appliance on top of your favorite hypervisor, whether that's VMware, Hyper-V, Citrix Zen, Nutanix, AHV, and bring your own compute and storage to the table here. So you've got some flexibility in how you can choose to deploy, leverage Unitrends hardware, or leverage that Unitrends virtual appliance deployed on top of your own CPU and storage resources here. A way in which we're enabling some folks to streamline operations, just a little bit about the product. I know that we don't have time today to get into a full demo, but SLA policy is a great way for our users to really streamline operations. We talked about those growing systems, and rather than setting a schedule, we're going to take our fulls on Sunday, our incrementals throughout the week. We want to enable you to meet those RPOs more effectively, so you can set a policy based on the backup frequency or the RPO that you are trying to achieve. If we have a tolerance or a threshold for data loss of 15 minutes on this system, group those systems into a policy and set that RPO at 15 minutes. You'll be taking an incremental backup based on the RPO that's set. But also, in a single operational step, as you're building out this policy, not only are you confirming or determining the local protection, but you can also have replication automatically kick off, create the backup copies, and push them to any hot or cold backup targets. A hot target being another Unitrends appliance, really powering DR. A cold target could be our archive or an air-gapped copy, such as disk or tape. Just one way for our users, just one example of really streamlining some of those local operations. You can also, certainly where more granularity or control is required, come in and create more customized schedules, but a lot of our users love those SLA policies in conjunction with the recovery testing. They set a policy, they're testing for compliance, they ensure that those RPOs are being met, and they're leveraging that incremental forever strategy to really drive quick RTOs as well. With regards to near zero RTOs, and we talked a little bit about this, you can leverage Unitrends Instant Recovery for VMware, for Hyper-V, for Windows assets. This enables P2V recovery, spinning up a Windows image as a virtual machine for very, very quick RTOs. Replicas, again, we can be more proactive here, creating them in advance, keeping them up to date with every backup that's taken of the original asset, and bringing these replicas online into live mode to assume the role of a failed client. The important thing to note about replicas is you're looking to carve these out proactively. You're only on the front end allocating storage for the replica. It's consuming no compute, no memory until it's booted live. So for one of our customers at Lamar County, they were really looking to streamline some of these operations. They've got 19 IT staff across 18 campuses for the different schools and different district offices that they are serving. Their key operations were across VMware, and they had some physical Windows machines still within that environment. But before leveraging Unitrends, they had entirely manual processes. They would direct attach in hard drives and copy files to take those drives off-site. They didn't have a lot of confidence. They weren't sure what the backup windows really were we able to meet them, and they had no way to verify or test their recovery. So when Ross Randall their IT director came to the county. He had used Unitrends at a number of other offices and really felt strongly. He opted to look at Unitrends for his new district and opted to deploy 2 physical of our appliances. They had all-in-one protection for that appliance, for their environment, excuse me, and they were leveraging one appliance as their primary, another as their target, and they had that target appliance at their DR site about 30 miles north. So for these folks here, they were really able to automate the reporting on the status of their replication, easily see, yes, we're receiving the backup copies. They were able to test down to the application level, ensuring that backups were going to be usable. They were able to meet compliance. The underlying data was intact. They still wanted to keep an air-gapped copy for long-term retention. They swapped out some of those existing or more manual processes by leveraging the Unitrends RxDA, writing copies to our disk archiving bay and popping those out. But they were able to automate a lot of that process and just keep swapping in hard drives as they needed. You can read a little bit more about their experience by searching for Lamar County Schools on Unitrends.com, and the link down there below for anyone that wants to grab it. But really for Ross and the folks here, it was ease of use, reliability, consistent reporting, visibility, and all of those processes. There was a tremendous shift from how they had been doing things manually without a tremendous amount of confidence before leveraging Unitrends. When we mentioned ransomware earlier, it's important, I think, to note that Unitrends has enabled our customers to augment some of their existing posture and really secure and harden their backup environment from that particular threat. And we take a three-pronged approach to the real challenge that is ransomware today. The first is from a prevention standpoint. In the majority of cases, this binary is targeting Windows-based systems, looking to disable Windows services, certain VSS writers, disable backup agents, targeting those Windows-based file extensions. The Unitrends appliance is written in hardened Linux. It's a hardened Linux kernel, and this serves us 2 advantages. One, it's frequently less targeted. That's not to say that there isn't code being written to attack Mac or other systems, but with over 80% of your install base being Windows across your global OS market, that's where they're investing the majority of the time and their resources. So it's targeted significantly less frequently. But the architecture of that Linux solution enables more security for the environment. We're landing all of those backups in a read-only repository. There is no write access to the backup files that have been created. So even if there was a malicious binary contained within a backup file that's written to that repository, it has no right. It has no rights to write changes to that data. The copies that are being stored are immutable. We have never had an appliance taken down by a ransomware infection. But on the front end, we're arming our customers with a proactive analytics engine that is establishing baseline patterns of behavior for the clients across your network that Unitrends is protecting. We're comparing values such as change rates, the overall entropy or the randomness of the data, levels of encryption, and when those baseline patterns are broken, it triggers an alert through our UI dashboards, email notifications, trap notifications, signifying that, hey, there are systems that are behaving anomalously. This behavior looks atypical. From what we've observed over time, you're going to want to take steps to investigate, and folks have used this to investigate if it is deemed that there is infection, quarantine the machines, wipe them, and they're leveraging a backup that's been fully vetted by Unitrends Recovery Assurance, tested down to the application level, scanned for signs of malware or ransomware to identify that clean, usable point of restore. Those alerts, just as an example here, will identify for you the impacted systems, the initial date that the alert was risen, and then any updates, the last time that we've detected an anomaly. We identify the source, so you can leverage this report here, see that, hey, we had an update at this particular date and time, so as we're looking through our backup catalog to find that clean point of restore, yes, we can leverage Recovery Assurance, but you could also see that, hey, the anomaly detection picked up anomalies at this day. We want to roll back to a backup before this point in time where we observe these changes to identify those clean points of restore. We're linking in applicable knowledge-based documentation, and of course our support is available 24/7 by 365, phone, chat, web support. You can even open up a VPN tunnel direct from your appliance to our support center and have one of our engineers work hands-on with you to remediate any problems or any issues that may arise. So for the folks at Taylor Community Schools in Indiana, this particular ransomware recovery and detection was key for these folks. This particular district serves 3 townships in Indiana, and they've got 3 IT staff for about 1,800 faculty, staff, and students. Now their environment was fully virtualized. Before leveraging Unitrends, they were rotating LTO tapes off-site, but they weren't able to test, and they didn't have the recovery capabilities that they were coming to expect for that virtualized platform. So they opted to deploy Unitrends Recovery Series appliances, and after deploying, they were able to eliminate the need for that tape library and some of that legacy equipment. They consolidated their footprint, reduced some of that sprawl. They leveraged Unitrends Instant Recovery for their virtual environment. And with that 1U rack mount appliance, they were protecting over 10 terabytes of data, all of their reporting, data reduction, all natively in that unit. These folks were hit with a ransomware attack that was propagated due to file sharing, keeping in mind that email and phishing really are the #1 vector and delivery method for a lot of these attacks. But after being alerted to the attack, they were able to quarantine that system, wipe it, and leverage that Unitrends Instant Recovery to recover that particular system and those virtual machines in about 15 minutes, according to Patrick Bernotis, their technology director. So really helped them out of a sticky situation. There was another customer, Bethlehem Public Schools in upstate New York, has leveraged Unitrends a couple of times to escape from ransomware attacks. I would check out that case study as well, in addition to Taylor Community on unitrends.com, because in a lot of cases, these threat actors, once they've found a way in once, will come back and try to, they may do it under a different guise, make things look a little bit differently, but it's often that they will come back and repeat that attack or continue to try and exploit an organization if they were successful in getting through that organization's defenses the first time. So for our solution, we've talked a lot about some of the local backup and recovery attributes or capabilities that Unitrends is enabling, but our solution goes well beyond local backup and restore. We're powering off-site recovery to another Unitrends appliance through the public cloud. There are a number of strategies and methodology that folks can use for long-term data retention. The Unitrends cloud, archiving to a public cloud target, leveraging long-term retention settings on our appliance, even full-service disaster recovery as a service through that Unitrends DRAS and the Unitrends cloud, and we're going to talk a little bit more closely about that service in a moment. But we're enabling customers to really enhance their data protection, and we're raising the stakes from that age-old rule of thumb 3-2-1 backup, enabling 4-2-2 data protection. So what we would recommend from best practices is that your first copy is going to be that production copy, whether that's physical infrastructure, virtual infrastructure, production storage, your application workloads. You can protect those again with Unitrends, a number of different methods for protection locally. The second copy of the data resides on the appliance where it's immediately available for restore. Again, we're sizing out those appliances to provide you with local retention. Maybe it's 30 days, 60 days, somewhere in that range, so you've got a number of backups and recovery points directly on the appliance that you can leverage. It's important to get a copy off-site, and that third copy may be to the archive or the cold copy, physically disconnected or in an alternate location. You can replicate backup copies to disk, to tape, to another storage device, to a public cloud bucket path, and the fourth copy is going to the DR site or the hot site, that hot copy, where it's immediately available for recovery. With Unitrends, you can manage DR on your own, replicating from one instance of Unitrends to another. You can replicate to Unitrends deployed in AWS or Azure and perform your DR in the public cloud. You can leverage Unitrends for our hands-free disaster recovery as a service. So I did want to take a moment And for these folks at Lynx, really took advantage of that protection. Before leveraging Unitrends, this transportation authority in the greater Orlando region was serving 3 counties, and they had operations across a mixed environment, VMware, physical Windows, and SQL was that primary application. They were leveraging tape backups. They weren't getting a tremendous amount of local retention. The deduplication was inefficient, so their storage costs had started to balloon on them. All of that manual offsite rotation was being performed by the staff. They had no way to automate getting those copies to a separate location. They were manually taking them to a fireproof vault or location. So they opted to deploy Unitrends physical appliances, that local protection for their environment, replicating to a second appliance at the DR site that the Transport Authority was managing themselves, and they swapped out tape for more reliability and disk through the Unitrends RxDA, so they could still get an air-gapped copy off of the production network to an immutable copy on those disks, but they were able to consolidate some of that footprint. The RxDA, I think, is a half rack height in height, so it really streamlined that local footprint. They were able to automate replication instead of that manual process to bring the tapes to the DR site. Instant recovery for their virtual environment, reducing that footprint. And these folks were such a fan of Unitrends when they upgraded. They originally deployed, I believe, back in 2013. And when they upgraded last year for greater capacity as their environment had continued to grow, they actually donated their existing unit to another agency. They said, you know, this technology is fantastic. We want you to reap the benefits here. We're going to donate you our existing hardware. It still works just fine. We've outgrown that unit over the last 6 years. So I love that story that they were repurposing and donating that. And for these folks, it was a lot of automation, speed of recovery, and visibility that really, for their team and their specialists, was key for Unitrends. But in the theme of getting that data off-site, I did want to make mention of some of the use cases that Unitrends has for the public cloud. We've seen a lot of organizations that are going in that direction. So we can enable cloud migration, assist with disaster recovery, land your backup copies into low-cost cloud storage, even backup production workloads that you might be running in AWS EC2, for example. And we do this across a couple of different solutions here. Now, the Unitrends software, Unitrends Backup, can be deployed in the public cloud marketplace for disaster recovery in the public cloud, landing backup copies to a public cloud target, or for backing up those cloud VMs. The Boomerang tool is a really neat product and one of my favorite in our portfolio, and the use cases there are more around migration and disaster recovery. So Boomerang today is for use with VMware environments, and you can replicate the blocks into low-cost storage into either an AWS S3 bucket or Azure Blob Storage, that cool storage for Microsoft Azure. With the goal of migration or disaster recovery in mind, once you've replicated those blocks, you can use the Boomerang tool to deploy them into the compute cloud layer, and all of that conversioning and formatting is native from the product. So you don't need to be an expert in standing up these instances. They're configured natively. So for example, if you've migrated your VMDKs into S3, you can deploy them into EC2, and that formatting and conversioning from VMDK to AMI is all native. It will deliver or provision out the appropriate amount of CPU and memory resources, as well as assist with configuration of the EBS storage volume. So if the goal is migration, once you've deployed those VMs, your goal is complete. You can let the Boomerang license expire. You can purchase Boomerang as a 30-day temporary license for migration. Very, very powerful. We had a customer of ours actually in Australia migrate over 700 VMs from on-premise to AWS, and they did so about over a weekend. I think it was about 72 hours or so. With the goal of disaster recovery in mind, you've deployed those instances into the public cloud, and when you're ready to restore to the local site, you can restore the blocks from the cold storage from S3 back to your local environment. You can even copy back the production instances from, say, EC2, for example, back down to your local vCenter, and that reverse formatting is all handled natively by the Boomerang product. There's a push-button deploy, push-button copy back. Really, really nice tool, I think, to enable or assist with migration or disaster recovery goals into the public cloud. Now, in addition to these use cases, we've alluded to the Unitrends cloud, and it's a really popular offering among a lot of our customers. It was the most widely adopted service last year among our users, and for a lot of our customers, they love the purpose-built nature of the cloud because it's made it a little bit more straightforward to grasp. But because it is purpose-built and manufacturer operated, it's not a public cloud where you can kind of design or build out your own use case for it. We've designed our cloud with two key use cases in mind. The first is the long-term retention of your data, where we're storing backup copies in a GFS methodology, but the licensing is predictable year over year because we're basing it on that local footprint, not cloud storage. So if you need 7 years of retention for particular backup copies, you're going to understand that based on the volume that you have locally, what that 7 years retention will cost. It's not snowballing as retention is built over time, and that's where in a lot of cases with the public clouds, things can get very, very expensive. You're consuming more storage and you're storing more recovery points as that retention builds. With the Unitrends cloud, we're taking ownership and management of that back-end environment. The retention is built into the cost. So once you have determined that retention period, you'll have backup copies available to you in perpetuity. With that, you've got self-service recovery. There are no fees for sending data to the Unitrends cloud, no fees for recovery. You can recover your cloud-based backup copies from your local interface, download back individual files. You can perform that granular recovery of individual items from the Unitrends cloud. You can import the entire backup group down to your source appliance to initiate full recovery of a system if necessary. Again, all through your local UI with no additional fees, and especially speaking to SLED organizations, the cloud does meet a number of compliancy standards. SSAE 18, SOC 2, we're leveraging AES 256-bit encryption for data in flight and at rest. We meet the mandates for CGIS, GDPR, HIPAA, FERPA, a full list of the cloud compliances you can find in the cloud FAQ on unitrends.com. But in addition to long-term data retention, management of that backend environment entirely by Unitrends, it also enables us to provide hands-free failover, that disaster recovery as a service. It's a rapid spin-up of your critical systems, so you can eliminate some of the cost and the complexity that goes with managing a colo site or a DR site. You've got all of this hardware that's hopefully going by without usage, but there is cost to maintain that equipment. You've got costs to lease on the building. If it's not a location that you own, you've got management and staffing overhead there as well. And the process that failover would be entirely manual. With Unitrends, declaring a disaster is making a phone call to our support center, and then we initiate that spin up from there. And our team is going through all of that heavy lifting for our subscribers. Starting enrollment in DRAS begins with a consulting engagement with our cloud course team, identifying the protected systems, the recovery point and the recovery time objectives, the compliance objectives here, and the DR response for us as the vendor. Once we've seeded that data, we start to build out the cloud environment proactively, defining networking configurations, boot order dependencies of machines. If you've got machines that are require that interoperability, bring up the domain controller before we bring up the web server. For example, here. We're mapping through firewall rules, QoS, provisioning out public-facing IPs if you needed to host a website out of our cloud. All of that pre-planning, the application scripts are being defined by the user, so we fully understand what the response needs to be when we receive that declaration. We execute regular testing, report back to our users the status of both compliance and application performance, and then we're maintaining, again, that back-end environment, monitoring replication, ensuring that we're receiving the backup copies, and keeping that environment up to date. We're so confident in our process over the number of years that we've offered this DR as a service. The SLAs that we provide as a part of this service are guaranteed. They're based on the recovery time objective. We offer a 1-hour, 24-hour, and best effort SLA for those workloads, and they are money back. There's recourse to Unitrends if we were ever unable to have systems available in the time as specified. You can read a little bit more about the DR service schedule via this link below here. But for our users, what it kind of looks like here at a high level is we've seeded and developed that stack in the Unitrends cloud. The data is already been seeded to the Unitrends cloud. That environment has been provisioned in advance. When disaster strikes that local site, you declare disaster, you make that phone call to our support center, and we will spin up the DR site and provide you with an SSL VPN and IPsec tunnel so that you can reroute that user traffic. You're now running operations out of the Unitrends cloud. The backups are continuing. We continue to take backups while you're running in the DR site. So when you're ready to rebuild or recover, the local site has been restored, new hardware, software has been implemented where necessary, we're ready to rebuild. We're going to seed your most recent backups to a brand new appliance and overnight that to you with data from your DR site loaded onto that appliance. From there, you begin local recovery to restore those systems. When you are ready to switch back production to the local site, we're going to tear down any last Delta changes after receiving that notification. So we start to tear down the DR site, we send those very last changes to that local site, you restore that data to the appliance, and then you perform one last local sync, restore those last deltas to the system, start to bring them online, reroute that user traffic, and then we send a new prep kit to capture changes for future failover or future event declarations. Really, really robust service, and you can kind of mix and match the systems that you enroll. You don't have to enroll your entire environment. In a lot of cases, customers will be enrolling a domain controller, some financial softwares and databases, really those key workloads that they need to continue operations in the event of a major outage. So that last piece again, and really driving all of that confidence, is Unitrends recovery assurance. Not just benchmarking compliance, but going beyond that screenshot verification, and those recent tests are the application scripts that we are executing. You can run tests against particular services, your Active Directory, domain service, IIS, run tests for Exchange and SQL environments, run a query with expected output, verify the status of particular instances, scan drives and folders for malware. If you don't see exactly what you're looking for among the 50+ canned scripts that we've built into the platform, you can write your own custom scripting as well. So we're running over 12,000 of these tests, almost 50,000 per year for our customers in the Unitrends cloud. But you can run recovery assurance locally to identify potential roadblocks. One of the reports that is the output here will report on within the recovery process where there may have been failures or warning. Particular services are not responding, the data within a backup file was corrupt, or we're having some sort of error here. We want to be able to identify these well in advance so that they don't impede recovery should we need to call upon these backups. So you can execute regular automated sandbox testing down to the application level to really drive home that proof and confidence in your ability to restore. Absolutely love recovery assurance. It's such a world different from a lot of users that have been relying on that screenshot verification, and with mixed results in a lot of cases here. So the other piece here is, we mentioned earlier that increasing use of SaaS throughout organizations. And this particular graphic we pulled from Microsoft's website, but a lot of these other service providers are operating a similar model. Ultimately, they will provide you with availability and take responsibility up to the application layer itself. Hardware failure, geo-redundancy, availability is all being supported or provided by Microsoft or the service provider, but ultimately the users that you're bringing to the service, administration of the application, and ultimately the data is the responsibility of the subscribee to the service. There are limited protections in place for things like human error, malicious insiders, accidental deletions, viruses, and malware. The recycle bin is not an adequate retention strategy for an O365 environment, for example. Deleted items are purged, I think, after 30 to 90 days, depending on your settings. SharePoint items are eliminated after about a half year or so. So you really do want to make sure that you're shoring up those particular platforms. We do enable through spanning cloud-to-cloud backup of these different SaaS platforms, the O365, the G Suite, even Salesforce. You're enabled with granular recovery of individual items, automated backups that are running. Similar to the Unitrends cloud, the backup environment is being managed by us as the software or the service provider here. So you're getting infinite retention and unlimited storage based on the cost of your users or the subscription. We don't care how many backups copies are accumulating. We're managing that back-end environment. You just ensure that all of your users are protected where necessary. You can auto-discover new accounts, perform some really nice functionality such as cross-user restore, recovery to shared mailboxes or folders if you've got individuals that are leaving the organization, restore those items to another mailbox or a shared mailbox. Some really nice flexibility here, and again, it's a per user, per month subscription. Very, very straightforward, with some robust capabilities through spanning. You can certainly take a look there if you're interested in protection for your SaaS environment. But the other piece with an increasingly mobile and remote force is that we don't always have the benefit in that the devices that our users are relying on are coming in regularly and connecting to the LAN for those backups. So for those remote or roaming or increasingly mobile endpoints, there is Unitrends Cloud Backup, also enabled by the Unitrends Forever Cloud. It's a straightforward backup for particular clients or assets, especially those that are mobile. It is standalone, so you don't need a Unitrends appliance, physical or virtual appliance, to leverage Unitrends Cloud Backup. It's a lightweight agent that's installed on the endpoints, and it replicates the backups directly to a target in the Unitrends Cloud. So you can perform self-service recovery really from anywhere that you have an internet connection. You don't need to come in regularly to connect to the LAN to perform backups or recoveries. So this begins with the Unitrends technology, but really enhanced for this use case. We started with a focus on file-level backup for workstations. Again, you don't need an appliance, but when we talk about some of the hardening and customization that's gone into this solution, it is hardened for endpoints that are going to disconnect frequently. We recognize the users might be hopping onto buses, onto planes. They're not always going to have the most reliable internet connection. We don't want failed or hanging jobs or errors, so some of that hardening has reduced a lot of those errors from those frequent disconnections. As we mentioned, self-service recovery. Now, if you're a particular agency or department and you're billing other colleges within the university or other departments within the municipality, there is that multi-tenancy enabled cloud-based UI. And again, for a per user, per month subscription, very, very straightforward to license. We manage that back-end environment to provide the retention for users here. So really straightforward. Just again, something that we were hearing from a lot of our users. Hey, you know, we can perform backups of the workstations in our environment, but we don't always have access to some of those mobile endpoints, and it's critical that we're taking those devices into account. A lot of industry experts estimate that we're very close to the tipping point. By the middle of this year, even the middle of 2020, we could be creating as much, if not more, IP outside of the traditional data center than inside of it. So it's critically important, or increasingly important, for a lot of organizations to be able to protect those mobile endpoints and the data that's being created there. So with that in mind, I know we covered a tremendous amount of ground. I do want to have some time here for the Q&A, but there are a number of resources that I would encourage folks to check out here. We've got some great landing pages that delve a little bit more into the use cases with education, with state and local governments that you can leverage and check out on unitrends.com. As always, our toll-free phone number, company contact information is posted there as well. So I'd like to check out here and look at a couple of the questions that we've got so that we can answer those. Just excuse the box on my screen while I check these out here. So Bob is wondering, how do I license DRAS? And Bob, we've got a couple of different options there. So first, we're going to determine what's the right RTO for the assets that you are looking to protect. 1 hour, 24-hour, or best effort. Now, any of these SLAs you can license on a per instance or a per machine basis, per server or VM protected, but you can also license that best effort SLA against the larger data volume. So we license the Unitrends cloud in 500 gigabyte increments of protected capacity. That's based on your local footprint before any dedupe and compression. And you can, in addition to having that volume replicated for retention, you can have all of the machines within that volume enrolled into DRAS. You can upgrade particular machines to Elite or Premium for that time-bound SLA, or leverage that best effort recovery SLA for larger environments or a larger enrollment in DRAS. We do have a question here from Manish about cloud compliances, and Manish, we did mention earlier that the Unitrends cloud is SSAE 18 SOC 2 Type 2 certified. We do adhere to the compliance standards for CGIS, for FERPA, GDPR, HIPAA compliance through our use of encryption and certain retention policies. Another key note to mention is data sovereignty, where we're operating cloud data centers across 5 different countries across the globe. We're never replicating that data outside of the country of origin. So there is redundancy put in place for each cloud environment, but US data, for example, would never land in our Canadian data center. Canadian data would not be replicated down to the US. We adhere strictly to the data sovereignty laws, but more information around compliance and sovereignty can be found in the Unitrends Cloud FAQ up on unitrends.com. A question here from Marie, and Marie is wondering, how are the appliances licensed? So Marie, the Unitrends appliances, the Recovery series, are based on a capacity license. So we've got 15 models of the hardware that is licensed, or with capacity, excuse me, from 2 to 120 terabytes. 15 models in between 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 16, 20, 24, 32, 40, 60, 80, 100, 120. So that's a no-limits license. It's based off of the capacity of the appliance, but you've got unlimited agents. You can register in as many virtual machines, as many physical servers as you need protection for, because it's based off of capacity. And again, keep in mind that we want to size these appliances for 3 to 5 years of growth and ensure that we're giving you the local retention on the appliance that you need as well, whether that's 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, or a more customized deployment. Let's see, we do have one question here. Is Boomerang only for AWS? And you can use Boomerang for AWS or Microsoft Azure. You pair the protection groups that you create locally for your VMs with a bucket path into S3 or Azure blob storage to start. Additional deployment into compute clouds can be handled from there, but you can use Boomerang for Azure or AWS. Some great questions here, folks. I really appreciate it. It looks like that's the bulk of what we had here. So again, any questions, please do feel free to contact us. I'll hang out for the next couple of minutes here if anything else kind of comes in last minute. But otherwise, I really want to thank you all again. And we recognize that, particularly in SLED, the challenges are unique, but we are here to help. So feel free to reach out to Unitrends at any time if we can be of additional assistance. I want to thank everyone again for your time and attention today for today's webinar, for submitting your questions and some of your comments. I appreciate all of that. We look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. So at this point here, again, my name is Adam Margette, a technical specialist here with Unitrends. I want to wish you a great rest of your day, rest of your week here. Thank you again for joining, and take care, everyone.